Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about a pressing event that is in the news, and it involves Venezuela and their current leader, which is Nicolás Maduro. And I pulled up the charts for both the country and for Maduro so I could better see what is going to be happening, because what's going on right now is there are major threats by the United States to the Venezuelan president, Maduro. And what has actually been out there is that there is a bounty of $50 million on his life. Now, he is been said to be part of the cartel or working with drug lords or all of this, and sending that to the United States, and or dealing with oil, transferring it to places that he shouldn't, and all sorts of things are going on. And really, the people in Venezuela are not happy. There's a lot of people that have dislocated themselves to different countries because of all of this. So I thought it would be very interesting to see what's going on in the charts. Because from the charts, that's where I'm going to rely on my answers. And that is if the charts are correct. So let me scoot over and bring up the charts of... First, let's look at the chart for Venezuela. And if this chart is correct, this chart is, they have a full moon, and the full moon where the sun is in Gemini at 21 degrees, and the moon is in Sagittarius at 14, almost 15 degrees, they're opposed to each other. So the reason why I'm focusing in on this and where Saturn is in this chart is because in the month of January, we have a stellium of very important planets all lined up in Sagittarius. So therefore, it is hitting the moon. And that is the most sensitive point in a chart. Additionally, in the month of January, we have Saturn, where it is around early part of Pisces, where it is aspecting Mercury by its square and the natal Saturn. So transiting Saturn sits right at the midpoint, squaring both Mercury and Saturn to the degree, pretty much. So Mercury deals with communications. The communications are blocked. And Saturn deals with the reality and the truth of things. Saturn, aspecting natal Saturn, brings the truth and reality and the karma to the forefront. But I think I can't help but notice that transiting Mars is crossing over their moon this month. And that causes attacks and problems. But Jupiter is going to be on their sun. And the sun actually deals with leadership and presidents. So how can this be? That is very interesting. But I gotta say, all those planets in Sagittarius are also aspecting the sun. That's gonna be Mars, Venus, Sun, when they all line up together. And they're going to line up together around the 9th of January at the degree of 25 degrees. So essentially right before that, the first week of January, those planets are aspecting the sun, and Jupiter is going to pretty much station on the sun around the month of March. And that is telling because that represents freedom and good leadership. Jupiter is the planet of freedom and good opportunities. So, more than anything, I have to show you the chart of Nicolás Maduro. And we actually have his time. So we can look at his whole chart from the ascendant and from the moon as well. But he has a very difficult chart. He's got Mars conjunct Rahu, which is actually very violent. He is and will speak in a very determined and a very rough. He has a foul mouth. Let me put it that way with Mars Rahu in the second house. It represents our speech and our mouth. Now look across from Mars Rahu. In his 8th house, he has Saturn K2. And let me tell you, that is a really rough conjunction to have. I'm telling you, I used to call it the curse or the blessing, because it will create problems. Anyone that has this conjunction, whatever house it's in, I promise you they have some problems to work out in this lifetime. They really do. And it can become their blessing. That's why I call it that. So it's not all bad. But let me just say this. With Mars Rahu and Mars casting its aspect to the Saturn K2 in the 8th house, that is the house of deep, dark stuff. The 8th house can deal with deep problems. It can deal with psychological problems. And I'm calling them problems instead of gifts because it's Saturn K2, and they're both malefic planets. Malefic means bad planets, create difficulties in your life, in other words. So that's Saturn K2. That is a deep, dark thing. And it can deal with, the 8th house can deal with corruption and crime. And it can deal with murder. It can do, and it, because it is the house of death. So here's the thing. I know I've been talking about the planets being in Sagittarius, but by the second half of January and February, second half of January and throughout the month of February, we are going to have Mars in Capricorn. And Mars is attacks. Mars can deal with violence. And it's going to go into his 8th house. And it's going to cross over his K2. As a matter of fact, it's going to cross over his K2 by the time of, I think, well, not quite the end of January, but into February. And then it will cross over his Saturn. With Mars on these placements, we are looking at the possible annihilation, or he has to step down, or the worst case scenario, someone could take him out. So I wanted to pull up his chart in terms of when the transiting planets are actually exactly hitting his natal planets. And so when we talk about a transit, that is actually where the planets are moving in the sky. But what we do is we actually look at it in terms of how they're going to either conjunct, oppose, or somehow aspect the planets of your birth chart. And this is how we make our predictions. So I happen to notice that transiting Mars is in a crucial place for the months of January and February. that they will tick off or cross over exactly conjunct his natal K2 and Saturn and his natal Mars and Rahu. So that combination is being activated, and it's in the 8th house. The 8th house is the house of endings, change, transformation, death. The 2nd house is actually a house that can deal, it's called a Marika in Vedic astrology, and it can deal with endings as well. So this is crucial that he's got these 2 houses of major change and endings being affected by transiting Mars, and where all the planets are lining up the end of January. So I'm going to give you the exact dates, but remember, sometimes things happen a little bit before or a little bit after the exact dates. It's not always dead on at the same time, but it's always around that time. So Mars will first of all aspect Mars. So that's going to be when transiting Mars is in Sagittarius and fully aspecting natal Mars by its 8th aspect, which is very, very difficult. And that will be around January 10th. Now, January 26th is crucial as well, because that will be when transiting Mars is in his 8th house and on his K2. Exactly. So around that time is extraordinarily difficult for him. Remember, K2 is losses and Mars is violence. And they're in the 8th house of endings, death, and transformation. So put all those things together, and I think you're getting a picture of what could happen. And then by February 1st, Mars will conjunct his Saturn. Mars conjunct Saturn, and Saturn is in the 8th house and actually rules the 8th house. Remember what I said, the 8th house is corruption, endings, can be death. It is the most difficult house of the chart. And we have transiting Mars in Capricorn, its exaltation sign, on his Saturn in the 8th house. What does all of that mean? He is in grave danger. That is what it all means between this time frame, and even by February 17th, Mars will again aspect Mars by opposition. So I'm going to say between January through February, he is in grave danger. He needs to exit or go into exile, and or just not push, because he's in danger. And that's all I wanted to say. I wanted you to get the gist of what transiting planets can do in a birth chart. Yes, this is really, really important for us to know about astrology. So it can actually give us the predictions of what we need to know is happening in the world by looking at world leaders, as well as looking at countries' charts. I did all of this in my predictive workshop, which you can actually purchase if you like, about all the countries in the world. Everything's on my website. Go to galacticcenter.org. You'll find that whole workshop. Plus, you can sign up for my free newsletter and get all of these transcripts written out, sent to your email. Free. Also, check out my Patreon if you want to become part of our spiritual community, as well as the Galactic Planner. This is so important. The Galactic Planner will do this for you personally, and it will do it for Maduro if he's interested in knowing when all these transits are going to hit. It will notify you each day. This is so important. It can help you avert problems and or take advantage of the good times in your chart. So the Galactic Planner is so important because it does all the transits. Sign up for my planner, go to galacticplanner.com. As well as, if this has inspired you to want to learn astrology, go to my university website. Go to universityofvedicastrology.com. Thank you.